Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another specking adventure. I wanted to go ahead and give you guys an update on the 949 QMax Coolant Reroute Kit that I did a while back. I didn't have an opportunity to attend a really hot track day for the past year until recently. Obviously, if the weather was not super hot, then the car is not going to overheat. But considering that variable, I can't necessarily say that the coolant reroute was doing its job, right? Because of the fact that it wasn't even all that hot. But this past weekend, I actually was attending a track day at West Track, and the temperature actually reached 109 degrees. To provide you some context, the car actually started to overheat 20 minutes into a full hot lap session. So in terms of cooling mods for chatter, I've actually done the 949 QMax cooling kit, as well as the Koyo-Rad aluminum radiator. And then on top of that, I also have the OEM water temp gauge to help me monitor the situation. Those were the three things that I wanted to have in my car before kind of jumping into another hot track day after my incident last year overheating at the track at Buttonwillow. So during that day, the car did great for the first 3 sessions. The temperature ranged from approximately high 80s all the way to low 100s. The car ran fine for those 20-minute sessions, spread throughout those ranges of temperature throughout the day. The hottest period of that day happened to be late afternoon, around 4 o'clock or so, and that's when we were running the last session of the day. I actually parked my car under the shade, hoping to kind of cool the car down a little bit before taking it out. When I started the car, it was registering something like 170 so degrees on the water temp gauge. When I took it out for the first 20 minutes, everything seemed okay. There were certain periods of time during that session, I would say maybe about 15 minutes or so into it, that when I downshifted into second gear and I was on the throttle, you can kind of feel like the car was like choking itself. Under normal circumstances, there would have been more power available, but the car was just not going. It's almost as if like it was heat soaked or something like that. The car just didn't really want to go no matter how much you were stepping on it, and you can kind of feel and hear it at the same time. I was kind of experiencing this, and I think this was around, the water temp gauge was registering some 220, low 20s. At around the 20-minute mark, my stock gauge, which I still have in the car, started to move up towards the 3/4 position. That's when I backed off the car, and that's when I just called it a day. So obviously these cooling kits that were made for Miatas, we as owners put them on the car in hopes that it would help us in hot weathered situations to help the car cool more efficiently so that it's not going to overheat. Just because you have the coolant reroute kit, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to overheat. Under really hot temperature situations, your car can still overheat. One potential solution that I know some spec Miata guys are running is that they would run triple core aluminum radiators, which I obviously do not have in the car. If I really wanted to go down that route and I wanted to track my car in the future during those really hot summer days, that is a solution, a potential solution that I could look into. As well as you could probably fab something where you engage both of your fans to run continuously to help you cool. For normal track days, track sessions don't normally last over 20-25 minutes. My car didn't overheat until that 20-minute mark. So I would say for normal track days, and if you're not like endurance racing or something like that, I think the car as is right now, you don't really need to worry too much for cooling. Another thing that I wanted to touch upon is the OEM factory water temp gauge. I know there's been a lot of information out in the webs about how the NB stock gauge is a dummy gauge. When I first looked into it, wanting to find a solution on properly monitoring the coolant temperature on my car, and that's kind of what I came across in terms of information, is that the NB gauge is a dummy gauge. How I interpreted that originally meant that that gauge doesn't necessarily work. It means that that gauge is there, but it doesn't tell you anything. And if it did tell you something, it was probably kind of like an on and off switch, meaning you're not overheating and you're overheating. It doesn't have like an in-between. That's kind of how I interpret it. And so I can tell you that based off of my experience, that the NB gauge, I don't consider it a dummy gauge. It is actually a truly functional gauge, and let me tell you why. After I installed my AEM Aftermarket water temp gauge, it would tell me if like a specific number, what number, what degree, what temperature my car is running. I wanted to kind of keep an eye on both gauges, so that I can use the OEM gauge as a reference to let me know what number I'm seeing on my AEM gauge, if it's hot or if it's optimum. Given my situation and how I was monitoring both gauges, the OEM gauge will move past the half mark at around 225. It'll reach the 3/4 mark at about 230. When will it reach the full mark? I don't know, I'm not trying to find out, but I'm assuming it'll probably be in the 240s range. For those of you that also think that, this is still a dummy gauge because the range at which it goes from half to full is too small, I think that's more of kind of like a user error, because either way, when you're on track or if you're in really hot conditions, I think it's up to the driver themselves to really understand your car's condition, how your car's performing, how everything else is affecting your car. So it's really up to you to keep an eye out on your temperatures. If you're on track every single straight and it's a Miata, it's super fucking slow, you should have enough time during that straight to really check all your temps, check to see if your car is okay before you're making another lap around. And I think it's completely doable, even if you're on the factory gauge, to use that time on the straight to just glance at your OEM gauge to see if your needle is moving up or not. As a driver, you should be in tune enough with your car that you can feel that something's off. Similarly to how you can, if your car's bogging because it's so hot or stuff like that, you should be able to feel stuff like that. So, in conclusion, I want to wrap this video up with letting you know that the car still overheats. And I do want to mention that my car is actually pretty old. It has 245K on the clock. So this could be a motor issue. The last time I checked my car's compression, it was fine, but maybe your under 100K motor with the coolant reroute doesn't overheat in these situations. I can't really tell you, compare apple to apples, because my car is actually really fucking old. But yeah, that's kind of my experience with the Cooling Reroute Kit from 949. I hope this kind of provides you with some context if you were thinking about getting it, or if you got it done and was wondering, if it still could overheat. I hope this video was conclusive, and if not, please leave your questions down in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more Spec Geek adventures. See you guys next time.